Welcome to the Homegrown Podcast. I'm your host, Liz Haselmayer, along with my husband, Joey.
Good afternoon.
And together we hope to educate, inspire, and equip you in your pursuit of true nourishment. Today's guest is Melissa Dowbiggin, and she is the sugar-free coach. And I'm so excited for today's episode because it is the beginning of the year. Our family is personally doing a sugar cleanse right now, so this is very top of mind for us. And I know that Melissa's story starts with her own sort of sugar addiction, sugar cleanse, overhaul of her lifestyle. And so I can't wait to dive in. So Melissa, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me. Yes, I'm Melissa Dowbiggin, and I am a holistic nutritionist, sugar-free coach, and I have been doing this for a long time, helping women specifically to lose weight by battling their own sugar addiction and start living low sugar lives so that they can lose weight that they want to or have more energy and finally take back control of their health.
I love that. I want to hear what led you down this path, as you just alluded to. So start us from the beginning.
Well, I guess I would go pretty far back. Even as a teenager, I was more prone to eating so much more sugar than even all my siblings. I would be the one who would be going and like sneaking all the snacks out of the cupboard, and then I would hide the wrappers when I didn't want everyone, my siblings, to find out that I was the one eating everything. So that's what I would do. And it just ended up turning into, it turned into an eating disorder. I would say it was a sugar addiction, but I didn't know it at the time. So that's kind of what it turned into, because I was so afraid of gaining weight, but I also couldn't stop myself from eating so much. So I had this like a lot of battles and a lot of like internal battles and back and forth. And eventually that led me to deal with the eating disorders, and I was introduced to intuitive eating. And while some of the concepts in that approach may work, it didn't really work for me, because that approach is honor your body's signals by honoring its cravings. And when all I wanted was sugar and all I craved was sugar, when you're honoring that, constantly honoring that, and giving what you think your body needs, then you're still just eating a lot of sugar and you're never really dealing with a problem in the first place. So I tried that for a long time and I realized that wasn't really working for me. It was actually not until I started working, well, I had my kids, and then my youngest, he developed like asthma. It wasn't initially diagnosed because he was too young, but he had like asthmatic symptoms, and it was this asthmatic cough that he dealt with. And he would cough for like 4 or 5 months at a time. It was crazy. And it was like an intense cough. Like people remember his cough. He would run around outside and come in, and he would vomit because he would be coughing so hard. And so that's when we actually all went on the GAPS diet as a family.
Oh, wow.
And so we went on that for about 1.5 years. And that's when I kind of realized, like, wow, how much of a problem sugar was for me. Because I don't know if you know much about the GAPS diet, but it takes out all forms of sugar, essentially, other than fruit and honey. So that's when I had done a lot of work in our diet before then. And with my own diet, I had started eating a Weston A. Price style type diet and took out a lot of the fake sugars or the refined sugars. But I was still, I guess, eating too much of the natural sugars. But realizing how much of a problem it was for me during that time really helped me to understand and start trying to discover what was actually happening in my body and in my brain. And that's when I realized, okay, this is what I've been dealing with for so long. I've been dealing with a sugar addiction. It wasn't an eating disorder when I was young. It was a sugar addiction. I firmly believe that now. And I know that was what was the problem with me. Not, I had different doctors and therapists tell me it was a control issue, that I had a control issue. But it wasn't that. It was that like I was hooked on sugar.
Yeah. When you were doing the GAPS diet, did you ever go deeper into the world of like candida overgrowth or like balancing your gut microbiome? And did you ever think maybe that was maybe the root cause of that sugar addiction and craving?
Um, it's possible. I didn't dive too deeply into that, but
Mm.
I did study holistic nutrition and I did learn a lot about that. And I've done my own candida cleanses over the years. And while that certainly could have played a part, I don't know for sure that that was what was causing it in the first place. Um, yeah, it is entirely possible
Mm-hmm.
The intuitive
because I
diet.
don't think I didn't have a good diet when I was young,
Mm-hmm.
so having that, that's, I guess, where it starts, that candida overgrowth. I didn't have a good diet. I had a lot of processed foods. I didn't have fermented foods. I didn't even know what a fermented food when I was young. I had no idea what sauerkraut was.
Yeah.
So that could have certainly played a part.
The intuitive diet,
Intuitive eating.
intuitive eating.
Mm-hmm.
I heard that phrase. I don't know that we've discussed that before here. And it sounds, based on my intuition, right? Funny enough, is that just like, based on what you said, a way of eating where you basically just lean into whatever you crave? Is that what that means?
Intuitive eating allows all foods, And so you'll see in a lot of intuitive eating communities, like they'll be, if you wake up and you want a big bowl of cereal, Cocoa Puffs or whatever for breakfast, then just honor that. And that will help you to not overeat and not binge.
Interesting.
That's kind of the idea, where, I don't necessarily agree with that anymore because of what it does to your blood sugar levels and what it's doing to your brain when you're overeating on sugar. But I think the intuitive eating really leans into honoring your hunger and fullness levels, not necessarily what you're eating or when, but understanding when you're hungry and when you're full and not going past that point.
Yeah.
There's probably something to be said about intuitive eating. There's like a primal instinct to go like path of least resistance, right? And so whatever I'm going to be able to metabolize and consume and eat that's sweet and or high in energy quickly, I'm going to want to do that thing. And I think that it's possible that the intuitive eating concept was maybe like a good thing when we didn't have access to a ton of foods that are just going to overload us with sugar and carbs really, really quickly. I mean, waking up with a bagel, a bowl of cereal, and a cup of orange juice because that's what I crave is going to send you into just crazy spirals for the rest of the day. And next thing you know, you're crashing on the couch because you're exhausted. And it's like, well, I craved that, right? And I think that totally makes sense. The when you're eating, though, what you're saying is, or how much you're eating.
Mm-hmm. Your hunger cues.
Leaning into that rather than the what. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some of this brain chemistry, what's going on when we are consuming a lot of sugar, because it's not just an empty craving. Truthfully, we know that there's a reward system that is kind of going against us in terms of us trying to limit our sugar intake. So talk to us a little bit about what that is.
Okay. So what is happening in the brain when you're eating a lot of sugar is, say you eat like a donut or pastry or chocolate, whatever it is, for the very first time. You're going to get a nice high hit of dopamine. It's not going to be like drugs. Drugs are really violent release, but it is going to be a higher release than what you get from a balanced meal. So you get a high hit of dopamine. The 10th time you eat that same donut, or the 100th time you eat that same donut, or 900th time you eat that same donut, you're going to get that same high hit of dopamine. It's not going to taper off over time. When you eat a balanced meal, say like a new meal for the very first time, you get a nice high hit of dopamine. It's nice new meal, delicious. But the more you eat that same meal, that dopamine tapers off. So with these ultra processed food and ultra satiating foods, that dopamine does not taper off over time. And so what's happening in the brain is that you're you're constantly giving your brain hits of dopamine. The brain doesn't actually like that. It doesn't like constant hits of dopamine too much, right? Too much of a good thing. And so what the brain does is that you have these dopamine receptors, and the dopamine receptors start down regulating. And so you have fewer dopamine receptors now because you're giving it constant hits of this stimulant. So in our case, it's sugar. You give it constant hits of sugar, the dopamine receptors are going to start down regulating. Well, the good news is that you can reverse that. You can, once you start taking sugar out or start taking, this is with any addiction, once you start taking out that stimulant, you do go through a withdrawal period because you don't have as many of those connections anymore, as many of those receptor connections, dopamine connections. So you take away that stimulant and you're kind of gonna feel like you're gonna be fatigued, and you're gonna probably have a headache, and you're gonna feel down because you're not getting that dopamine. But the body can regulate its own dopamine out again, and it builds up the receptors again. And what studies have shown us is that it does take about 21 days. And that's why you see all these 21-day sugar cleanses and 21-day fast, whatever, 21 days to rebuild those dopamine receptors. Now, it doesn't mean that's not going to happen again. If you start eating sugar again like before, then the same thing's going to happen in your brain, and you're going to be more prone to that happening. But so that is what's happening in your brain, is that you just have fewer dopamine receptors. And so you're going to crave it more too, because you want that hit of dopamine, like to make you feel good, especially when you're stressed or when you're going through an emotional time. Even when you're tired, you're going to crave that more.
Mm-hmm. So it's like you flood the system too much with too much dopamine, and your body's like, whoa, 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 we can't handle this. We're going to maybe like turn off some of our receptors or whatever the word is.
Yeah.
And then you're kind of like muted to it. So you're like, okay, now I need more to even get a signal through, because there's less, communication happening, because I was just flooding the system before. So then what can that withdrawal period look like? Like, what's a common symptom set of sugar withdrawal?
So with the withdrawal, yes, you'll get headaches. You'll feel tired, and you'll get really intense cravings. And then you might feel lightheaded, brain fog, dizzy, sleeplessness. There's a whole slew of symptoms that can come along, and it's different for everybody. And it really does depend on what the rest of your diet looks like and what you're doing. Like, you can certainly buffer some of that by just eating a well-balanced diet and eating nutrient-dense foods, and, getting some light exercise and trying to go to bed on time, stuff like that to help buffer that. But you're going to get symptoms if you were prior eating a lot of sugar.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Let's get into some of the symptoms of eating too much sugar. And I think that, again, I won't say their name, but someone in this room may sometimes overindulge in sugar, and it's me, just to make sure.
I was like, are you trying to shame me right now? No, I'm just kidding. I would admit it too.
Anyhow, what are some of the things that can happen to us because of an overindulgence of sugar, other than just, receptors, dopamine impact? Like, what are some of the downsides of overconsumption?
So the biggest thing for most people is how it acts on your blood sugar regulation. So if you're eating a lot of sugar and you haven't eaten anything else, you eat like something super sweet, or like, a big croissant, I guess, just a white flour, whatever it is. Then that sugar, that glucose from the sugar or the starch, is going to flood the bloodstream, and you're going to get high blood sugar levels. You're going to get what's called a glucose spike, high blood sugar levels. Your body likes your blood sugar to be in a very narrow range. And so it's going to release the hormones, it's going to release insulin to bring that blood sugar down. But it releases a lot. because of the amount of glucose that has entered your bloodstream, and it's going to bring your blood sugar level too low. And then you're going to get cravings again. And the symptoms of that, you get cravings, you might be irritable, feel anxious, but you get really hungry as well. So it's leads to overeating. And so there's that, how it acts on blood sugar levels. But overeating sugar, it's really hard on the body. It's very acidic. So it leaches minerals from your body. It increases inflammation. And your immune system isn't going to be as great. I think I've read this a few different places that 8 hours after eating sugar, your immune system is affected for that 8 hours after eating sugar.
Wow.
So, it's not easy on the body.
The inflammation is interesting to me. Where might we see that inflammation in the body?
Where? I guess it could be anywhere.
Okay.
I guess it depends. So when you eat refined sugars, especially, and really any sugar, you get glucose and you get fructose. Well, the glucose is going to act on those blood sugar levels. And you're going to get inflammation from imbalanced blood sugar levels. Because when you get an imbalance of blood sugar levels, that high insulin levels, that's going to trigger inflammation. That's going to trigger the body to store fat as well. But then you get fructose. Fructose is digested differently. So fructose doesn't go right to the cells like glucose does. It has to go through the liver. Cannot be digested any other way but through the liver. It gets digested similarly to alcohol. And so what happens is it goes through the liver and it gets turned into, I believe, I can't always remember the terms. It gets changed into glycogen in the liver and it gets stored in the liver as fat. So that actually fructose specifically can lead to non-alcoholic fatty liver disease.
Wow.
Probably one of the biggest contributors is the high fructose corn syrup and just the sheer amount of fructose in our diets today and in the standard American diet today, leading to this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But so that then affects kind of blood sugar regulation on the other end. It increases oxidation in the blood, so you're more likely to increases aging, and it increases inflammation in that way too. So there's a lot of different ways that it does increase inflammation. And of course, it affects your gut health too. So you're going to be feeding into the bad gut bacteria, which affects the immune system. And I know you've probably heard of leaky gut, that can lead to leaky brain as well. So then you have inflammation of the brain too. So I don't know if you've heard this, but Alzheimer's now is being called type 3 diabetes, which is super interesting.
That is super interesting. I had a grandmother pass away to that very disease, and I wish we would have known what we know, what we're learning today. And I would be so curious because, I mean, she was put in a nursing facility maybe the last 10 years of her life, and the food there is atrocious. So that's not aiding in her healing. I mean, she had a severe decline once she entered into that home. And so that's, I think the breakthrough research we're discovering is going to be really life-changing. I did not know. I was always curious about fructose. And so I want to ask you this because I know for us personally, we are kind of compensating with eating a lot of fruit since we're not eating any other forms of sugar. But break down, especially for us whole food folks who might only be eating, maple syrup and raw honey and fruit and coconut sugar and all those things, like which sugars are the best if we are going to consume sugar? And then for a sugar cleanse, like what do you constitute as a true cleanse? Like, is it just fruit only? Is it honey? Like, talk us through kind of your perspective on all of that.
Okay. I'll start with that. So a true cleanse, I guess it really just depends on where you're at. But I like to only eat low glycemic fruits during a sugar cleanse. So not getting rid of all sweetness, but getting rid of even the natural sugars and eating low glycemic fruits like the berries and maybe green apples and grapefruits. Because then you're also helping your brain to rebuild those dopamine receptors by keeping some of the really sweet fruits out. And if you've been eating a lot of sugar, it helps to kind of reset your taste buds as well. So eating just the berries, low glycemic berries, ones that aren't as sweet and help to balance your blood sugar as well. And then always like pairing that with a fat or protein to balance your blood sugar. As far as the best sugars to eat, I would just say stick to the natural sugars. But you can overeat it. Like you said, they still have fructose, they still have glucose, they're still refined. Like honey is wonderful. I love honey. It's got the enzymes, and it's got, especially have a good raw honey. It's got the enzymes in it. It's antibacterial, and like I put it, I make a homemade elderberry syrup with honey, and so it's great for illness, great for a lot of stuff. But of course, you can overeat on it still, and so just being mindful of how much you're eating is really important. I just like to stay away from the old the processed sugars, like the high fructose corn syrup, and because natural sugars, they're not as some of them are slightly processed, of course, to make them into the form that they're in. I think the only one that's not really not processed at all is honey. Even maple syrup is boiled down. That's all it goes through, though, is just boiling down. So you have some of the nutrients still left in those. And even like coconut sugar, there's a little bit of fiber and there's some nutrients left. And because of that, it is a little bit lower on the glycemic index. So it's not going to have such an impact on your blood sugar regulation, but it still is a condensed source of glucose and fructose. And so you still have to be mindful of how much you're eating. And if you did have a really poor diet in the past, then maybe you do need a little bit extra help regulating your blood sugar. And so when you're eating those natural sugars, eat them maybe after a balanced meal, after a meal that you've had protein and fat with and some fiber. So after a balanced meal and not on its own.
Yeah, I love that. For families who are like, okay, I'm interested in doing this, but I'm nervous about my kids. What encouragement and experience do you have with convincing our kids to hop on board?
Well, with kids, I would say like for my kids anyway, I'm if we're doing a bit of a sugar cleanse together, then I wouldn't be as strict with them. So I wouldn't say like, just the low glycemic fruits for you guys, because their bodies are pretty resilient. And so I more fruit for them maybe. And, some of those super sweet fruits like pineapple can feel really indulging sometimes. And so allow that for them. And you can bake muffins just with mashed banana or just using maybe dates. You can make a cookie with just dates that's like, or just mashed banana. So those are really good things to use with kids, and do the same thing with them. Like if you don't want them to have like this sugar high, that like crazy, then do the same thing with them with a balanced meal. Eat your sugar or sweet treat, whatever it is, after a balanced meal. And so, yeah, it can be a little bit harder with kids, but I guess my kids are still little. And so, I'm still of the mindset that I'm here to nourish them and make sure they're getting what they need. And so I decide what's put on the table. They don't decide that. I decide, and they choose what to eat, whether to eat or not. So I think parents, maybe it probably become a little bit more difficult with teenagers, but then you got to really start educating them and talking to them about it and, going in it with them. But with little kids, of course, I think the parents really need to take charge of their children's diet
I
And,
love that.
you know, because if my kids had the choice, they would eat nothing but cookies and candy all day.
All
You know,
kids.
they do eat great. They're great eaters because they eat a lot of what I put in front of them, and they love food. But if they had the choice, it would be nothing but cookies for breakfast, lunch, and dinner.
Mm-hmm.
I love what Melissa said because I totally agree. And as younger kids, I mean, that's what we're here for. We're here to nurse them. We're here to put the food on the table, to help craft and shape what a balanced diet looks like because they're learning. They don't know, right? They're gonna take what they desire most, and if they're gonna like trash their day and spike their blood sugar, they have no clue. They don't know. And as
Yeah.
kids get older, something that can be really powerful in all aspects of life, but definitely in food and the way that we manage our diets is leading by example, right? And so if we're going to do a sugar cleanse, you know, we're not doing a sugar cleanse in our house and then Elizabeth and I are downstairs eating cake. It ain't happening, right?
Yeah.
We're downstairs. We're going to be more strict with the way that we treat sugar for ourselves than we ever would be for our kids.
Mm-hmm.
And if they ask us why we're doing it, we're like, because it's awesome. It's good for us. And we want to reset those. Now we can use new language because you've given it to us, Melissa. We can say we want to reset those dopamine receptors so that we can, you know, reestablish the joy that comes with some of these treats and also isolate them for times that are more special so that we can enjoy them more. And it becomes so habitual to sit down with a cup of tea with 3 scoops of sugar, a scone with an icing on top. And then it becomes like, well, we're having tea and tea happens every day. And I'm like, okay, I don't know where and how we got here, but we're at a place right now where tea is happening every day. And our kids are old enough now to bake amazing pastries. So bless their hearts. But leading by example and creating fun games out of it for older kids for us has so far worked. So we gamified it, and I told all of our kids that we're going to do a 30-day sugar cleanse, and we've been pretty strict. I will say now we're learning about the fruit factor. I would like to start to integrate that in a little bit. We definitely do a lot of berries, but we've been doing a lot of oranges. Do you think oranges are too high in sugar?
Oranges are a little bit higher on the glycemic index, but with fruit, fruit has fiber, right? So
Yeah.
it's not going to act as just like sugar in the body because it has that fiber, it has that protective factor in it, and that fiber is gonna slow the glucose and fructose from entering the bloodstream too quickly, and not all the fructose gets absorbed because of the fiber.
Mm-hmm.
So even though, yes, but as adults, I say sometimes we need that little bit of extra help, especially if we grew up on, you know, cereal and mac and cheese, then, you know, our bodies aren't, you know, they're not perfect. That's for sure.
100%. And you mentioned green apples. So we've been doing a lot of Honeycrisp in this house.
Which Honeycrisp is like the sweetest apple.
So maybe
They're
we should.
delicious.
They are so good. But I do like green apples, and I think that it would not be hard for us to switch. So, you know, our poor kids. But we're going to switch to green apples, like after this call. So that's a great idea. I love that, and because we're a big, and we're going to work on this after the sugar cleanse, like bedtime snack family. I'm sure there's a lot of people out there that also potentially deal with this. If you are, oh my gosh, let's band together and start a support group because the bedtime snack is brutal, and the green apple probably would be a very sufficient bedtime snack to help wean us off of
green apple with like a nut butter or something.
Yeah.
Like
that's awesome.
Some sort of fat, protein in there, or apple with cheese. Like that would be.
That's a great idea.
Great idea. Very satiating, but a little bit of sweetness so they still feel like they're winning.
Just a charcuterie board for nighttime.
Dude, it's about to get so bougie in the Haselmayer household. Man, I will say, like,
cured meats.
Just to share some of our experience, because we're on day 10 of this. Our teenager is she has shared pros and cons. She's upset. She's not upset. She's missing her regular sources of sugar for sure. She hasn't had tea every day because I won't let her put sugar in it, and so
she won't drink it.
She's dropping some of her habits. Although like my younger kids are like, yeah, give me the tea with a little splash of milk. Ooh, this is so good. And I feel like they actually enjoy tea, whereas I feel like maybe our teenager just liked the sugary drink.
Yeah, 100%.
And so we're learning that. But she also did admit, like, she's like, I'm glad we're doing the sugar cleanse. It's teaching me like to love fruit again. She said that earlier this week. And, I did let the kids have kombucha still. So that's really the only thing that they're drinking that has any sweetness, because the only sweetness in it is other fruit juices. So I was like, okay, there's technically no sugar in this, although it is sweet. And it's effervescent, so it's kind of like a soda for them. And we don't drink regular soda anyways, but we were drinking Olipop and just finding our little like nourishing treats here and there, and it was just getting too much. It was too expensive and it was getting to be too much. So they are now lowering their threshold and their expectation for like the joy and sweetness factor. And I think it's exactly what you're talking about, is this rewiring of their brain. And we're seeing it happen in real time. And it's cool to have a daughter who's old enough to be able to communicate to us like, yeah, this is what I'm feeling. She also was like, hey, I've been a little bit shaky lately. And so I think that I could be like, maybe that's some of your blood sugar regulation, like coming back into balance. So I think that this is all putting the pieces together for me. So this is really, really helpful. So
yeah, that's really great that she's noticing thod things, and you as parents, like, just putting your foot down, like, nope, we're not putting sugar in the tea. Like, that is amazing. That sounds like something I would do as well.
Yeah.
But a lot of parents are afraid to do that because they are often like think that sort of strictness could lead to an eating disorder. I think like teaching them those skills and teaching them how to say no to sugary foods, because we live in like a dopamine centric world, and all of our food is just like acts on that dopamine center in the brain, the pleasure center in the brain. So you really need to learn to say no and learn what it does to your body. Otherwise you kind of get stuck in that trap. So like, kudos to you for doing that.
Yeah. It's been easier in some ways than I thought and harder in other ways. The concept of restricting your kids and fear of that leading to an eating disorder is something I always find so fascinating, because I've said it before, but like the opposite of an eating disorder is not just that you're allowed to eat whatever you want. That is also just another form of disordered eating. And I myself suffered from an eating disorder as a teenager and ended up in treatment and went through all the therapy and all that. And so I'm very much attuned to that world, and it's conversations I have when it's age appropriate. I haven't really like shared a whole lot with our kids specifically, but I'm watching for those signs and I want to have those conversations. And I will say from our experience, any sort of restriction in our household always comes with a purpose. It's like, hey, we're not saying sugar is the enemy. We're just saying we think we were eating too much of it, and we take fun, like pride, and have fun challenging ourselves, and we want to do a family-wide challenge. And hey, in February the girls are already talking about like, ooh, let's like set up a tea party and like have a celebration of like all the things we couldn't eat. And it's not like we're dogging on them and saying like, no, that's terrible, blah blah blah. So we're always giving them sort of like the why behind any sort of restriction, and we're not making it about an identity or, this is who we are, we don't eat sugar. I'm not saying that to them. I am giving them an opportunity to say, hey, we do hard things, and this just happens to be the hard thing, insert here. Next month we're going to get rid of bedtime snacks, so buckle up, kids, because 2025 is going to be just a rolling 30-day challenge for our house, because we just feel like leveling up. So
I actually think bedtime snacks will probably be harder than sugar.
Yes, I agree.
But like, it's definitely been fun. I am curious though, to kind of with what you just said, Melissa, when we go to reintegrate sugar back in, what would be some tips and tricks for us as we're this is our first time doing this, and the fear obviously would be that our children just go on like a wild sugar binge come February 1, right? What would be some of the reintegration tactics that you think would be most beneficial for our family?
Well, I have to say, start slow. And if there's habits that you didn't really love before, like maybe too much like sugar and tea, then don't reintroduce it. If they've gotten used to the taste of tea with just milk, like, that's great. Keep that up. So just try to keep up as many habits as you can that you've picked up during this challenge. But then, yeah, add in what you like, I guess, and just make sure to moderate that. So maybe 1 or 2 times a week, make something homemade, some sort of homemade dessert, and the rest of the week have the apples with the cheese, or even yogurt with a little bit of natural sweetener in it, like maple syrup or honey. And so just, yeah, try to keep up some of the things that you've accomplished over the 30-day or whatever, how long it is, challenge for you.
That's really smart. I like that. I think that I even like the idea that she just said of like a couple times a week, or almost establishing a new rhythm that can be looked forward to, right? Something that our kids can get excited about that's in line with the sugar. I mean, that totally makes sense to me. I love that.
Well, and I think some of that will happen naturally, right? You go 30 days, no sugar in your tea. You probably aren't going to start off with the 3 scoops, although it will be a conversation I will have. Like, hey, put 1/2 scoop in and taste it. Okay. Yeah, your taste buds have adjusted. Let's try to recalibrate a little bit. And then I'm sure that's just one tiny example, but something cool that has also come out of this challenge is that our kids are reading all the food labels and they're noticing sugar is in everything.
It is,
and
right? It's crazy.
It's so ubiquitous and it's like frustrating. But at the same time, I'm happy that they're becoming aware of this now, so that it's not like a shocker when they're in their 20s and like, I've been eating sugar for 2 decades already. So I think that that's all in all like a good thing. My next kind of question for you is like, I think sugar is hard because I think sometimes we have a blindness to it. Like, I think people don't realize they are heavy consumers of sugar because it's maybe a little bit here and a little bit there and a little bit here. Are there indicators of like, you might have a sugar addiction if blank, that maybe even if we think we're on this real food, whole foods journey, these are some better ways to kind of gauge whether or not you'd benefit from a low sugar diet. Are there obvious kind of like signs that we can talk to people about?
Yeah, I mean, if you can't go a day without eating sugar, and you do get those really intense cravings, then that's something that you really need to look at. If you're unhappy with your health or your weight, but you can't stop eating sugar, and it's affecting that, then you probably have a sugar addiction. Um, and then of course, like, if you can't stop eating sugar despite what it's doing to your health, then you definitely have a sugar addiction. If you know that you have, maybe you've actually been diagnosed with something like insulin resistance or type 2 diabetes, or it's even like some sort of cardiovascular disease, and you can't stop eating sugar, then despite the health consequences, then you definitely have a problem with sugar addiction and with the amount that you're eating. So that's when you really need to sit down and assess, like, how can I combat this? How can I get to where I want to be with my weight and my health, and overcome this sugar addiction? Like, people like to dance around the word addiction, but if it's something that's actually negatively impacting your health and you cannot stop doing that thing, then it's probably an addiction.
Yeah.
What if the sweetener that you're choosing every day is poised as or positioned as a healthy sweetener? Is that still something that we should be worried about?
Yeah, that's a really good question, because I know agave has really been talked about, like it's like a healthy sweetener. But it's really processed, and that it's still used like it's a healthy sweetener. And but it's almost worse than high fructose corn syrup. It's really dense in fructose. Wow. Really refined, really high in fructose. And so, yeah, it's hard to convince people who are eating things like that it's bad for them, because maybe they're listening to, I don't know, listening to different sources saying that it's good for them. But that amount of fructose, the body is not meant to metabolize that amount of fructose. It is really hard on the body. It leads to the non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. But even before that, it disrupts those blood sugar regulating pathways, and things like, brown sugar, that's not that great. So, and then of course these sugar alcohols too. People are overeating on these sugar alcohols as well, which, some sugar alcohols, they're okay here and there. I don't have a huge problem with them. But if you're, say, going on a keto diet and you still want that sweetness, people eat a lot of them. They make cakes and cookies and everything, and eat that stuff every single day, these sugar alcohols, and they're really hard on the digestive system. Like and your body feels it. Like, so yeah, it is hard to convince people, I guess, when that's their thing, and they've been led to believe that is what's healthy. But I guess you could just continue to educate people and show them some real data and real, you just look at the chemical composition of some of these foods and you can see, well, okay, there's a lot of fructose. So that's going to be not great for the body.
Well, sugar alcohol, just for me, that's ignorant. What are we talking about?
I was going to ask the same thing.
Oh, Melissa, what is a sugar alcohol?
Is that like stevia? Is that monk fruit? Like, what are we counting as a sugar alcohol?
Sugar alcohols, they're derivatives of, they're just derivatives of different foods, but they don't get absorbed by the body. So you have, like, what's a sugar alcohol? They all end in ose. So like maltose is a sugar alcohol.
Okay.
Okay. So our artificial sweeteners.
They're not artificial sweeteners. So artificial sweeteners are something different. So artificial sweeteners are the sucralose.
Okay.
They're the aspartame. Those are like chemical concoctions that are just really sweet, and they negatively impact the body. But erythritol, OL, they end in OL. So erythritol is a sugar alcohol. Allulose is a sugar alcohol. Maltose, I believe, is a sugar alcohol. Monk fruit and stevia, those are different. But the sugar alcohols, they're not absorbed by the body. They kind of, or not fully absorbed by the body. So they don't really act the same as sugar, but they're still sweet. But say if you have too much of a sugar alcohol, like xylitol is a sugar alcohol, if you have too much of that, it's really hard on the digestive system. So people will know if they have a little bit too much, it'll send them to the bathroom. Like,
no kidding.
Feel it like right away. Like you have just a little bit too much and you're sent to the bathroom. Like, and so people eat that, especially on these keto diets where you're eating, you can moderate it too. I don't think it's the worst thing if you're having a reasonable amount, but I don't know why I look at these groups sometimes on Facebook. I don't know how I ended up joining this, like a keto group, and all I see is recipes for cakes and cookies and pancakes using sugar alcohols, and I'm like, oh my goodness. And the comments are like, oh, I loved it, I ate the whole thing. And I'm like, that's a lot. That is a lot of sugar alcohol, and people are gonna be getting digestive symptoms from it. So I think like long-term symptoms, long-term, that can be really bad for your digestive system and lead to digestive disorders, like diagnosable digestive disorders in the future. So overeating on that is, so stevia and monk fruit, those are natural sweeteners. I use stevia sometimes, but I buy like the green leaf stevia. It's just an herb. It's a really sweet herb, but of course they they find a way to process everything. So you can get a really processed stevia. Still not going to be as bad as sugar, but it's super sweet. If you have too much, it kind of tastes a bit bitter. Monk fruit is just this, I guess it gets its sweetness. It's not a sugar alcohol, but it's kind of like, well, not quite like stevia. Stevia is an herb, but like monk fruit is a fruit that gets its sweetness from its antioxidant content. So that's why that's sweet. But I don't really ever eat monk fruit, so I don't know too much about it.
Okay.
It's usually kind of blended with erythritol because erythritol or monk fruit's really expensive. So you see a lot of blends with erythritol and monk fruit together.
So sugar alcohol and monk fruit to kind of like
Yeah.
work together to make the sweetness. Okay.
Yeah. Which can, for some people following like the keto diet, which I do not advocate for, by the way, following a keto diet, like they might use an erythritol monk fruit sweetener and instead of natural sweeteners or refined sweeteners.
Yeah. Monk fruit extract is in the protein powder that we really love. And it took me a while to get used to the flavor, but I like it. I think it's pretty good. And I think that lends like 3 grams sugar, 0 sugar. I can't remember. Very, very low sugar for our protein powder, which I feel sometimes protein, when people are making their own protein drinks, they can like do a couple scoops of collagen and then like 3 tablespoons of maple syrup. And you're like, whoa, that
And like 6 dates. And
Yeah.
you're like, holy smokes.
now you're talking about like a carb shake with a little bit of protein sprinkled in. So I think it's important to really balance those.
Frappuccino.
Yeah, that's a frappuccino at that point. Yeah, I love that. I would love to kind of wrap up today's conversation just giving people like a starting place. Like say they are that person who's like, okay, I think I am dealing with a sugar addiction, but like what do I do now? Just go to only fruit. So I know you have sort of a 7-day program, but if you could just leave our listeners with some encouragement and maybe some tangible action items of like if they want to start living a low sugar lifestyle, what are the best things that they can begin doing today?
Well, the best thing is just to switch to natural sugars. Start eating a whole food diet. Start eating a nutrient dense diet. Because when you're eating a balanced diet, say maybe they weren't eating a balanced diet before, maybe they didn't have enough protein in their diet. So just look at your diet, make sure you're getting enough protein for your body weight, enough protein, some healthy fats in there. And that kind of will depend on what your health goals are, but definitely get some healthy fats. Take it like the seed oils and stuff like that. And once you start eating a balanced diet, then your cravings are probably just going to naturally decrease because of that, because you're eating enough, you're eating satiating foods. You're going to be eating foods that are satisfying you. And so your cravings are going to naturally decrease because of that. So just start eating a balanced diet. When you want something sweet, then maybe try making it yourself with some nutrient dense ingredients and some natural sweeteners. And, putting a little bit of work into it kind of just helps you to decrease the amount of you're eating. Because if you're just buying, cookies from the grocery store, it's easy to eat a whole box and be like, okay, I'm done with it. I'll just go pick up another one. Well, you can just kind of combat that by just committing yourself to making the things that you like at home, but using better ingredients. And then number 1, of course, eating a balanced diet, starting to work on balancing your blood sugar levels because that's going to help decrease cravings as well. And then when you're ready for it, maybe just do a little stint, little challenge where you just eat fruit. You don't want to jump right into that because that just might make you go a little bit crazy and, give up and eat all the foods. But yeah, start working on giving your body the nutrients it needs in a balanced way, and see what happens. Yeah. And then of course, like if you need it, like get the support and get guidance from somebody who knows what they're doing, who has been through this before.
Yeah. I love what you said about like, making it yourself and putting work into it, like putting cookies 10 steps away from you because you have to go through the process of like, okay, I want a cookie, well, I have to bake it. Or, I want to make this thing, well, I'm going to cook it from scratch. And then it's going to be, not only do I put in some reward before, or some effort before I get that reward, but also it's not going to be this simple like crank through a box of cookies, because what effort did I really put into that? I bought it, took it off the shelf, now it's here. That's really like a subtle thing, but I think that can be really powerful. Be like, okay, you want it, you make it, So I love that little rule.
Not to mention you'll save money and you will have probably a cleaner cookie.
Yeah.
It's like crazy.
Yeah. Yeah. Just cooking for yourself is amazing. Such a good skill to have. And you're just leaving out so many of those unnecessary things that your body is getting when you eat prepackaged food from the grocery store. Like what they put in that, you don't really know what half that stuff is. So just keeping that out is perfect.
Yeah, I love that. Well, Melissa, for those of us who are going to embark on a sugar-free cleanse or sugar-free diet or a low sugar diet, will you let our audience know where they can find you?
Yeah. So I have a website, befreeandeat.com. I'm also on Instagram and Facebook, also at Be Free and Eat. And just to talk to people about how we can work, how we might be able to work together. Like I do give free initial 20-minute consultation calls, Crush Your Cravings. I call them Crush Your Cravings consultation calls. So if, easy to book that with me. But yeah, just find my website. I have lots of information on there. I do put recipes on there, and I do have a program as well called the Sugar Craving Solution that I take people through. The goal mainly for people is to lose weight, because, that is a lot of people's, that is a goal for a lot of people, because that's just what happens when you're overeating on sugar, and when you're not eating a nutrient dense diet, then that's just how it shows up on the body. And so, yeah, that is a really good goal to have. But I think approaching it the right way, and not just, reducing calories, but eating some nutrient dense Weston A. Price style type foods, while also reducing your sugar intake, like that goes a long way for people to get to that goal.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of what I focus on. And then I work with people one-on-one as well.
Cool. What does a consult call look like?
Yeah, we kind of just talk about what their goals are. So what your goals are, where you want to be, what you're struggling with right now. And so we kind of talk about maybe some actionable steps that you can take right now, but also how we can work together. So it's no strings attached. Like if I don't think it's a good fit, I'll try to point you in the right direction. But if it's a good fit, then I might suggest hey, let's work together on this. Let's get your body to a healthy state. Let's help you reach your goals. And if, that's not vibing for someone, I'll help to point them in the right direction, and maybe give them some little tips to start working on their health now.
Yeah, that's powerful. That's really awesome that you offer that. Well, thank you so much, Melissa. This has been so timely and such a great conversation. And I know our listeners are going to instantly be motivated to adopt that low sugar lifestyle, because it's been really helpful for us. Wouldn't you say?
I would definitely say.
I think it's great. I think we should all try to do somewhat of a cleanse.
I agree.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for joining us on the show today.
Till next time, Melissa.
Thank you.
Melissa Dowbiggin has left the virtual chat, and our kids are in trouble.
I actually feel kind of bad, because I think we've been kind of intense as parents. I wonder if our poor children, they're like, dude, mom and dad are so hardcore, because we really went cold turkey. We were day one, nothing. And it was even a big deal when I made the decision of we can have kombucha, but one a week. You know what I'm saying? Split one a week, which lasts about a meal time.
I don't even see it. I come home and find the empty bottle.
It was literally empty. It's one of those big bottles of kombucha too. Sugar cleanse. I highly encourage everyone in the audience to try it. And I agree with Melissa. If it's something that you have a hard time giving up, it's like with alcohol. If you have a hard time giving it up, maybe you have a little bit of a relationship to work on there. You know what I'm saying? So I just completed a whole year alcohol free and I love it. I don't think I could do a whole year sugar free, to be honest, but I think this low sugar thing is going to be really helpful to carry into all of 2025. Definitely hit up Melissa if you want that one-on-one support or group coaching or even just a consult call. That's why I wanted to ask of like, what does that look like? And you can just share your goals. Maybe you don't even know what your goals are yet. And she can point you in the direction of
100%
things you should chase after. I love that. Guys, thanks so much for hanging with us on this podcast. Baby Bowman, shout out. A little round of applause for Babe, who's just in the room, quiet and napping. I love it.
Yeah, he was born for being in the podcast studio, apparently.
Podcasting. I love it.
Big vibing.
Yeah. Cool.
Friends, if you've been around the show for a while, then you know that we have a lot of things that we have started and work on to help support you. But if you don't know, then I'm here to tell you that we have a lot of those things that we've built to help support you in your real food journey. One of those being curriculum, education, and books, resources, things to sharpen your mind and equip you with inspiration to help you cook more whole food-based meals. Okay. We got what's for dinner. We have what's for breakfast. Things to get you shopping lists, recipes, meal plan. It's all squared away for you. Go to homegrowneducation.org and you can find books for your kids to teach them about real food. You can find meal plans for your dinners, your breakfasts. You can also find our product-based business to find clean ingredients, soap that's going to change your life in your for your dishes and for your shower at shoptheh.com. So we've got lard-based soaps for sale in addition to coffees, teas, sourdough tools, other things that are escaping me, but definitely go to shoptheh.com and
were you looking for me to fill that in?
I was, and you just totally smoked me. So
I
it
was
is what it
looking
is.
out the door.
Friends, you can find us if you want to hear from us more on Instagram. I'm at Joey Haselmayer. Elizabeth is at Liz Haselmayer at Homegrown_Education. You can find this episode and all of our other episodes on YouTube. So if you want to watch us talk about these sorts of things and see Melissa and talk about us talk about sugar cleanses and other guests that we've had on YouTube, it's Homegrown Education.
I believe so, yeah.
I believe that's what it is on YouTube. Check us out there. We often will share links to that in our Instagram as well. We have a Substack where we share additional information for people. You can find that at substack.com/homegrowneducation.
Something like that.
Something like that. Friends, until next time, that's a wrap.